DurchBurch.
There's been a lot of controversy with Pokemon Sword and Shield since they were shown off in a more comprehensive light at E3 this year. The swirling rage pit that the fanbase became, and that in many respects still is, has heavily focused on the cons, with a strong tendency to avoid the pros at all costs to make their arguments better. So here I am, finally taking the time to put my opinion somewhere other than YouTube or Twitter comment sections. In this video, I'll be looking at 5 things that I really like about Pokemon Sword and Shield, as well as 5 things that I'm not happy about to add more fuel to the fires within the fanbase. Alright everyone, buckle up, get your arguments ready, cause this comment section is about to get feisty.
Kaboom!
While a lot of people have been caught up staring at a pretty rough looking tree, I've been more focused looking at literally everything else in Sword and Shield's overworld, battle backgrounds, and cutscenes, and one thing that I love is how realistic the depth of field effects look. It's a massive improvement over Breath of the Wild's persistent and thick, foggy haze, although it is one that doesn't help to hide any lower level of detail visuals in the distance. That said, I'm just kinda happy that I can see the distance without it being a gray-green blur of mountainous silhouettes. In the wild area, the distant cities look really beautiful, and on the main routes, the foliage pops way more than before, though that's probably due in part to the bloom on the fields of crops, but regardless, much of the region's atmosphere is just genuinely gorgeous. I feel like anyone could find one awful visual in a game, but to do so kind of ignores the beauty surrounding that object.
That didn't accomplish much!
The ground textures in Pokemon Sword and Shield aren't quite stellar, but that's not being helped in the slightest by the awful texture filtering that turns the ground into a slick green or beige smear. It looks really bad when compared to just about any other game of this generation. It doesn't look like the E3 build had any texture filtering at all, as I can't even see a line between qualities like Mario Party Deluxe has, though I suppose it is possible that this could be a result of them fading between them, but I don't know. This is even more noticeable on the water, where the ripple texture on the surface quickly devolves into a muddy, textured oil slick across the screen. Why did they think this looked better than the cartoonier water of previous games? It was a much better stylistic choice, and coming from Let's Go to this is the epitome of a jarring stylistic change, at least in the water. They desperately need to work on the texture filtering. At the very least, in future games or generations. This is this Game Freak team's first brand spanking new console title, and they aren't 100% used to working on the medium, so I'll give them a pass for now. But when the inevitable 9th gen games hit the Switch, they really have to look a lot nicer. That said, I'm sure they will.
Grand Slam!
The biggest issue with the follow mechanic in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee was the fact that many Pokemon looked like they were moving way too fast, or way too slow for their animation. This was likely a limitation brought about by using a set of pre-built follow types, but it ruined the run cycles of Pokemon like Persian, and left the run cycles for Pokemon like Metapod and Kakuna looking, well, just odd. That said, Pokemon Sword and Shield seems to have fixed much of this issue with the wild Pokemon in the wild area. Looking at Metapod, it hops along very slowly compared to Bunnelby, and I'm glad to see the newfound attention to detail with these walk and run cycles. It definitely makes the Pokemon look and feel more alive, and a lot less like the game assets slapped into a mechanic they weren't made for that we saw in Pokemon Let's Go. Jesus, that was harsh.
Oh, that was weak!
That's right, I'm still upset about the water in Pokemon Sword and Shield. You know there's a problem when the Pokemon have literally no ripples or anything while moving about the water. Even in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, they used a ripple effect around the Pokemon to make them look like they're, you know, in the water? However, this is not currently the case in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Pokemon just kind of move through it like it's a solid surface and they're, I don't know, ghosts? It looks weird. They enter the water, and then there's a little strip of darkened bottle, and then there's just more water. Every Pokemon in the water has this problem as of the E3 build. I'm really hoping that this is fixed by launch because it's one of the biggest unpolished parts of Sword and Shield's overworld. Everything else has been an improvement on Let's Go, but this polluted, oil-slick looking flat water is not an improvement in the slightest over the beautiful cartoony ripples and waves that we saw in Pokemon Let's Go.
What impressive impact!
One thing that we've only seen a little of, but that always exudes a wonderful energy, is the cities in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Each city looks beautifully crafted with multiple veritable metropolises compared to the cities of generations past. The scale looks to have been increased, with each city feeling far more like a city than a cluster of buildings stuck together. I'm really looking forward to exploring these cities, as they all just look very unique and intricate. That said, one potential downside to this could be a lull in the pace of exploration. I don't know about you, but I always try to talk to every single character that I see in the game. You know, I just want to make sure I don't miss any items, TMs, or other important tidbits. But if cities are too large, this could get tedious. However, this is not a huge issue, as I suspect that the cities will be somewhat more like Castelia or Lumios, where the NPCs that wander don't really say much of anything.
A light tap.
One of the first things I questioned when hearing about the wild area was how the Pokemon there would be leveled. And apparently the answer is that there will just be a wide variety of levels of Pokemon there. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely a first for Pokemon. Other games with open worlds do this a lot. In Breath of the Wild, some camps of Bokoblins will only include red and blue Bokoblins, but some may include black or silver or even gold Bokoblins if you're playing Master Mode. And when I was playing this game for the first time, not in Master Mode, I stumbled across a camp of black Bokoblins and Moblins, and it's safe to say that I was ill-equipped for them. That early in the game, they were a massive challenge to me, and could kill me in one hit with any weapon they had. Xenoblade Chronicles X also did this, but to a far wider extent. It sort of made the world into a puzzle. I found myself thinking, how can I sneak by this enemy twice my level without being brutally murdered? More times than I could count. That said, these two examples show the difficulty of the enemies quite clearly. In Breath of the Wild, there's an obvious color distinction between a blue Bokoblin and a black Bokoblin, or a whitish, silver, whatever you call it, Bokoblin, and a gold Bokoblin. In Xenoblade Chronicles X, the level is out in the open, though you can usually tell what's at a high level based upon scale or appearance, give or take a few jump scare enemies. The game makes it clear when there's something that's definitely too strong for you to fight. In Pokemon Sword and Shield, there doesn't appear to be an indicator other than the Pokemon itself. Machoke was level 26, and I'd assume that the Haunter that showed up later was at a similar level. My main concern is that players won't be able to tell what's at what level without, encountering them first. And this could lead to some players wholly avoiding more evolved spawns, thinking that they'd be at a higher level, and others having a worse experience because they ran into more evolved spawns thinking they'd be at a lower level. It's just not a good system.
Bullseye!
This is something that a lot of people have actually pretty much completely missed. Everyone's been too focused on the Scorbunny double kick animation from the Treehouse Live demo to have noticed that some of the Pokemon actually have shown off new and improved animations, such as the ones Game Freak had mentioned as a part of the reason for their cut back on Pokemon. This concept certainly isn't new. It was featured with every new Pokemon in Generation 7's games. And that said, almost no Pokemon from previous titles had these animations, if any. It always felt weird seeing a Yungoos actually snarl at me, and then when I ran into a Fearow, it just kind of sat there flapping. So far, every returning Pokemon in Sword and Shield has had an animation when it first appears. Let's actually take a look at them now. First, we see Bunnelby's new animation, where it furiously shakes while yelling upwards. Next, we see Wingull's, where it just kind of yells at us angrily. Then we get a look at Metapod's, where it rocks back and, yells at us. After that, we get Machop, which just yells upwards as if to say, "Why, Arceus, why?" Machoke comes next, with a similar but more muscly version of this existential scream. This is then followed by Goldeen, which has its fins good and ready to slap a bit sharp. Bisharp. After that, there's a lull in wild encounters, but we do get to see a few more, as at the start of a max raid battle and when a Pokemon is Dynamaxed, this animation is played again, but a bit slower to bring out the scale. We see Steelix roar furiously at the raiding party, which it honestly takes rather a while, all things considered. No one even flinched. In this same battle, we see a Dynamaxed Arcanine, which roars like the majestic doggo it is. Now, these are all the returning Pokemon we got to see in the Treehouse Live, but there's actually a few others from the Pokemon Direct that we already saw. The first one here is a Max Raid Gyarados, following the roaring trend set by just about everything else. Immediately after that one, we see a Dynamaxed Raichu. Later, we see a Max Raid Weavile, giving its own roar. Last, we see a short montage of a Max Raid Clefable, a Max Raid Dugtrio, and a Max Raid Quagsire. And sorry I went on that quest to document them all right there, but no one else has really gone and done it, so yeah. That said, that's at least one completely new animation for every returning Pokemon in these games. Even if they follow a pretty clear pattern of yelling at you, the sky, existence, they're all new. I kind of wish they did them when coming out of Pokeballs too, but I guess that would eat up a little bit of battle time. But regardless, this will be the first time many of these Pokemon have had any sort of entrance animation, other than the drop animation out of a Pokeball, since the Pokemon Stadium games. That's right, even when they used the same models and animations, those animations weren't in Pokemon Colosseum, XD Gale of Darkness, or Battle Revolution when a Pokemon came out of its Pokeball. It's kind of sad because they added a little personality to every Pokemon as soon as you met it. It's actually a pretty good feature.
Ah, that attack just bounced off!
One thing that Pokemon Sun and Moon were notorious for was releasing too many trailers of new Pokemon, showing many of them off before the games even came out. And while it's too early to say that Sword and Shield won't do this too, so far they've been a bit more conservative. I loved that immediately after the Nintendo Treehouse Live showcase of Pokemon Sun and Moon, we got a trailer featuring all of the Pokemon shown off in the footage. This was super cool to me, as we immediately got nice art, a showcase of what the Pokemon can do, and a chance to listen to some high-quality music and cries from the games. In the E3 demo of Sword and Shield, however, the two newly revealed Pokemon, Yamper and Impotemp, had no trailer, and this might be because they weren't on the Treehouse Live segment, but it's still disappointing. Like, we still haven't seen their official art yet. And this may not be as big an issue to many people as it is to me, but so far it's just made it so that I can't create my sprites for these Pokemon, and they're the only justification I currently have for putting off the legendaries, whose designs totally don't intimidate me because they're ridiculously detailed and could take well over an hour of brain melting work to complete. I just want a neat little trailer. Alright, so I just want to mention a couple small honorable mentions that I don't really want to go into too much detail on, but I like that they have type-based default hit animations. You know, when you turn off the animations and it just kind of has this little pa effect. Well, those are now type-based, as seen in a lot of Max Raid footage, and I think that's pretty cool. That said, I do dislike that the legendaries are very similar, and I just kind of think Zacian looks kind of lame. Like, why does he hold the sword? Just, like, put the sword on him somehow, like, make his teeth look like swords, or give him a sword for a tail, or put blades, like swords, coming out of his claws or something, you know? Like, the shield is part of Zamazenta's face. Why can't you put the sword somewhere that's not just in Zacian's mouth?
Look at that power!
Did you know that there were separate levels of Dynomax? Because I sure didn't until Joe Merrick from Cerebi pointed it out on the Pokemon status menu. It looks like there are 10 Dynamax levels as shown in this photo from the E3 show floor, which he tweeted. Now, we have no clue what these do, but they do make me a bit more excited for Dynamaxing than I was before. This may actually be the first time that they put a gate on how much you can utilize a gimmick beyond just words that they say in the plot. Do you remember Mega Evolution? That was supposed to be bond necessary. Like, in the show, your hearts literally sync up, and it takes a lot of trust between the Pokemon and the trainer to control the Pokemon during Mega Evolution. The game's hyped up the bond, but then they just let you do it with any Pokemon holding a Megastone, even though there were literally 2 bonding mechanics in Pokemon. There's friendship, and the newly introduced affection. They literally said, you need a strong bond to Mega Evolve, added a bonding mechanic, and just didn't think to combine the two somehow? Like, you don't have to do it for competitive stuff, but at least for, like, overworld or plot-relevant things, like, come on. Sorry for that. I'm quite passionate about that little piece of ludonarrative dissonance. All of that aside, this also points to there being some secret metagame to Dynamax. At this time, we've only seen Dynamax at level 1. and the only stat we've seen change is HP. But who knows if higher Dynomax levels will boost other stats, or make moves even stronger, or maybe even add more interesting max moves than the already terrifying ones that we've seen so far. Like, this mechanic still has a lot of mystery surrounding it, and I'm actually pretty excited to learn more.
The hit glanced right off.
You knew it was coming, don't lie to yourself. No one's happy about the culling of the national decks, especially not me. Just look at this meme my brother asked me to make and that, I actually made. I'm not one of those players who carries their best Pokemon from generation to generation, but I am the type who likes to train a wide variety of Pokemon. I always breed my starters at the end of one generation to carry their children into the next. And I like to train all sorts of Pokemon, good, bad, cool, or lame. I love using the Pokemon no one else will. I even planned to train a Maractus at one point. I mean, I didn't do it, but that was mostly because I got pulled into the next game before I just had the chance to get around to it. And I'd still like to train one someday, and Sword and Shield would be a beautiful set of games to do that in, but I just feel like Maractus isn't a likely candidate for these games. I'd be devastated if Weedle just didn't make it in, or Totodile, or really anything in my S Plus and S tiers for my Ultimate Pokemon tier list. That said, I understand that Game Freak's hands are pretty well tied. The games need to launch before the merch, cards, show, etc., meaning that even if Game Freak would be willing to delay the games, they'd face a lot of backlash with the Pokemon Company, and the company's handling all of the merchandise too. As a developer myself, albeit a very small one, I also know that it isn't easy to build a world, and that in any game project there's a lot you won't be able to realize if you want the game to be done in a timely fashion. It's easy to bite off more than you can chew, but unlike Game Freak, I don't have corporate bureaucracy, hard deadlines, or a budget to remain within. I genuinely feel bad for Junichi Masuda and Shigeru Omori, as they get harassed day in and day out now. While I'll certainly miss the national decks, I don't think the way to get it back is to harass people. Last time something like this happened, it was with Waluigi and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and people legitimately sent Masahiro Sakurai 9/11 memes, where he was the plane and Waluigi the towers. I don't want to see the Pokemon community be the next to do this. I don't want to see us sending Junichi Masuda a meme where he's a plane and the national dex is towers. We can't do this. We can't wind up like this. Because if we get anywhere near that point, I don't think we deserve to get the national dex back. It'll die for the sins of the community if we keep this up. They already know we're upset. They addressed it. They said that they hurt us. We don't need to keep telling them, even if they're not going to fix it immediately. We might see it return in the next generation of games, or even in the next game or games in this generation. Who knows? It's Game Freak. They release a lot of games. All of this said, I'm still excited for these games. Maybe not as much as I was before E3, but we've barely seen anything. We've literally seen less than an hour of unique footage from these games, and they're not done yet. Hopefully we'll see some added polish by the launch, but even if we don't, there could be so much more that we just don't know about yet. If you agreed, disagreed, or have any other opinions on these games, please feel free to drop a comment. If you liked this video, regardless of my stances, feel free to subscribe, like the video, do whatever you want. That said, I usually do streams, but every once in a while I like to make something big like this, and I thank you for sticking around to watch me ramble. I've gotta go do human things like humans do, and you probably should too. Enjoy the outro.